You're now listening to the Boys in the Booth podcast with your hosts, Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams. New episodes every Monday on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Episode 107 of the Boys in the Booth podcast. Welcome to it. Cody, Abrams, and Melbourne. And guys, I am jacked up for this one. We've got a special guest joining us, a popular guest, and we're going to be talking to him about a couple of big subjects. Before we bring him in, guys, how you doing?
Doing well, Harp. I'm here in North Augusta, spending a little time with my family before I take off to Europe for Christmas. So we're going to do a little early Christmas here, and then I'm off to Sweden. I want to start off, before I get over to Chad here, with a quick little rant. Why, when there's the lightest dusting of snow on the roads, do people have to go 60 kilometers an hour in an 80? When you're driving a 4x4 pickup truck, you're going 60 kilometers an hour with a light dusting of snow, and I get to sit behind you my whole ride home. It makes me want to just turn right sharp into the forest and just not drive anymore. Fuck.
Case, I can relate to that, but I think I'm on the opposite side here, and it's not about driving slow, but it's about walking slow. And in the snow the other day, I am a notorious fast walker normally, but in the snow the other day, it was my first day putting my boots on from last winter. I haven't worn them in about a year. I was walking through the slush on the sidewalk, and Paige is next to me. She's like, "What are you doing? Like, why are you walking so slow? Like, what's going on?" And I kid you not, like, I'm doing this to get my bearings. So I kind of understand, the driving slow, like getting used to it again. So I'm here to stick up for the slow drivers, even though I'm with you. They piss me off. Oh my God.
Drives me insane.
Good week for me, and the next couple are going to be busy, but after that I'm off for 3, and I can't wait to go home for winter break and play some pond hockey out on the St. Lawrence River. And we've got a nice day planned, a Boys in the Booth Winter Classic. Hopefully we're able to do something with that and film a little video for you guys, similar to the Pepsi Cup video that we did. So a lot coming, and just ready to enjoy the holidays and finish up my first semester of law school here.
Yeah, absolutely. And ready for the World Juniors as well. And it's going to be great. So anyway, let's bring in our special guest. It is Allan Etmanski, play-by-play man for the Kingston Frontenacs and a big fan of the Montreal Canadiens. Allan, how you doing, man? Welcome back to the show.
I'll tell you, I was a little hesitant to jump on this show because I talked a lot of smack about every single one of you guys over the last 6 months or so, and now it's my turn to eat a little crow. So I guess turnabout's fair play, but it's good to be back, and I'll take my lumps. It's all fair, and it's all in the sport. Right.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right. All right. So for this epi, we'll start with a little fantasy corner, which you're going to be a part of. Allan, we'll get you to talk about your Week 7 matchup in the Boys in the Booth Fantasy Hockey League, and then we're going to go into a conversation about Kingston Frontenacs forward and projected first overall pick in the upcoming NHL entry draft. That would be Mr. Shane Wright. And then a conversation about the situation with the Montreal Canadiens right now and the firing of general manager Marc Bergevin last weekend. So, Allan, you take it away for us to start Fantasy Corner here. Just a little bit on your Week 7 matchup, how you did, and who you're liking on your team right now.
I'm liking on my team whoever's healthy right now. I think I've got four major guys that are all on the IR, and McKinnon, Nurse, Line A, and Anthony Duclair now he's out. So it's been kind of a mismatch of guys who were available and maybe some guys that I wasn't relying on heavily to come through for me. I think right now the guy that's picking up the most points is Ryan Getzlaf, who's drinking from the fountain of youth right now, which is amazing for my team. But other than that, not a lot going on up front. My goalies are great. No complaints there. I've got Bobrovsky, Nedeljkovic, and Connor Hellebuck. So they're picking up the slack for my big four that are on the shelf right now. Hopefully they stay on their timeline, and I'll get them back in probably a week. But I think it's too late to make a push.
Allan, first of all, you're welcome for Getzlaf, and thank you very much for Wheeler, I believe. That was the trade, Getzlaf for Wheeler?
I think so, yeah.
And, I think at the time, fair trade, Getzlaf was popping off, and he kind of still is, and Wheeler was sort of slumping. So, I'm playing the long game here, so you're welcome for Getzlaf, one of your only guys producing right now in the absence of your big four. For me, another week, another win for the multiple scoregasms. That's 6 in a row. This week, though, was a very tight one. I played the Bacchus Door Bandits, and we were right down to the wire. 229 to 203 it finished, so about a 30-point gap there. But it wasn't until Sunday that I pulled ahead. He was ahead of me by 5 to 10 points all week. I picked up a couple players, specifically Michael Bunting was one of them who came in clutch. He got me 8.5 points on Sunday night to give me the win. And I'm in first place now in the league, and I can officially say that because the Meatheads finally lost. That's what we were all waiting for. Everybody in the league was waiting for Luke's team to finally lose a matchup. And so he did. We're both 6-1-0 now, sitting at first and second in the league. However, I have more total points, so I am currently sitting in first. Hopefully, I can keep that going this week against the Danbury Thrashers, not the Danbury Trashers. I think Dylan messed up the name there. So, I'm projected to win this week. Again, it's going to be a bit of a close one, but I'm hoping for the best here. One more thing before I pass it to Casey next, talk about his team. He's slowly climbing up the leaderboard, and it's pissing me off looking at it here. But I've got Drew Doughty back starting tonight. That was a waiver pickup. I don't know who dropped him, but Drew Doughty now is a defenseman on the multiple scoregasms in the Boys in the Booth League, and you guys should be very nervous about that. Case.
All right, I'm not very scared of Drew Doughty anymore for some reason, but I'll take your word for it. I was off last week, so I kind of want to give a quick update of my week 2 weeks ago because I was playing LVB and it came down to the wire. I won by 7 points, and really it came down to one game, like a legendary fantasy game, because on Friday of that week, I had Pierre-Luc Dubois and Kyle Connor, JT Miller, Connor Garland, and Thatcher Demko in a Winnipeg versus Vancouver game, and he had Shifley, Wheeler, and Eric Comrie, the goalie for Winnipeg, in that Vancouver-Winnipeg game. So it was all down to that, how that shook out. Dubois got a goal. I think it was JT Miller scored, or Connor Garland scored, assisted by JT Miller. Thatcher Demko got the win. So I absolutely ran away with that night and then took that week. I'm usually like a 200-point week kind of guy. Last week, god awful, absolute dumpster fire. It wasn't like I didn't have games. I had like 44 games and I only ended up with 152 points. Just no one came to score. Daddy JT Miller did not perform for me whatsoever, and I'm a little disappointed with him, and I sent him some hate mail for that. But just a terrible week, and it dropped me down a little bit. I thought I was going to be in third after that week, but hey, what can you do? You can't win them all.
You're coming for sure.
Oh, yeah. I did get Jack Hughes back tonight. Not only did he sign his ticket today, he also got cleared to play and is playing in a god-awful game against San Jose right now. So that's
perfect. Good. All right, well, a little update on the 2021 Pepsi Cup scoring champs. Not a whole lot of scoring going on again in Week 7. A 215 to 120 loss to Shipping and Yandling. That's your buddy Remy, Chad.
Yeah.
And that was last week to fall to 1-6. But guys, I got to tell you, I'm feeling optimistic about this week. I've got a tight battle against the Mail Order Brides. That's Corey's team, of course. They are 0-7 out of the gate. So projected to win that one, but it's going to be close. And I picked up a very popular player in fantasy right now, and that is a guy from my Buffalo Sabres in Tage Thompson, who is having a breakout season playing in the middle for the Sabres. He's got 10 goals, 16 points already in 22 games. So feeling very good about that waiver pickup, and trying to be optimistic about this week and pick up that second win of the season.
I hope you're optimistic. You're playing Corey. The guy hasn't set his lineups in 6 weeks. He's 0-7-0. Like, he's not even trying here. Like, I hope you're optimistic.
You're gonna pull off the old Patrick Steffen on the empty net and like roof it.
Yeah, exactly. And then they'll go back down and score.
Or when the one I'm thinking of is when Craig Smith was a rookie with Nashville, just airmails it over top of the net, goes back to the bench, and Mike Fisher's beside him and can't help but just laugh his ass off. Anyway, so hopefully I can take down the mail order brides this week. That's for sure.
I believe last week, Harp, just before we wrap up here, I believe last week we did the bottom 5 teams.
Yeah, so let's do the top 5.
Okay, so the top 5, I already mentioned the top 2. Me and number 1, the Meatheads at 2, Shipping and Yandling, who beat you last week, Harper. That's my buddy Remy. He's at number 3 at 5-2-0. The Danbury Thrashers, again, brutal name. You messed it up, Dylan. They're sitting in 4th, though, at 5-2-0. And in 5th spot, the team that I narrowly defeated last week, the Bacchus Door Bandits, that's Taylor Prosser. So all in all, this fantasy has been so much fun for everyone involved, all 14 teams. And, we're cruising down into the season now. We're 7 weeks in, and we're kind of, like, there's been a ton of moves, like, especially today and Sunday.
There's a ton of moves because we get, like, 4 different trade offers a day from AJ Galante over there.
It's always Dylan. Oh, and speaking of, Allan, actually, they followed you today on Instagram. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. AJ runs that, I think. I think him and his old man, I don't think his old man's too tech savvy, but yeah, they're out there and just hanging on to that 2 years of glory and stretching out as long as they can.
So how did that, like, do you have any sort of connection? Like, you DM them or something? Like, how does that work?
They've put a couple things up and, like, we've chatted a little bit and stuff, but other than that, not really.
Well, that's cool. I have a jersey
awesome,
on the
man.
way, so I'm looking forward to that.
Which one?
Yeah,
Like the NASCAR one or like the Army one?
Yeah, I got
the original.
I got the racing one. I'm looking forward to that. It's so nasty.
Sweet. Alrighty. Well, that does it for Fantasy Corner. Week 8 is underway in the Boys in the Booth Fantasy Hockey League, and now we'll move on to a conversation about Shane Wright of the Kingston Frontenacs. He is the projected number 1 overall pick for the 2022 NHL entry draft. And Allan, with you back in the rink doing Kingston Frontenacs games again this season, you had the pleasure of interviewing Shane Wright a couple of weeks ago. Just very simple question for you right off the bat. Why is this kid the real deal, and why is he an absolute lock for the number 1 overall selection in the upcoming NHL draft?
He's just so level-headed and so mature for his age. Like, you'd never know when you're talking to him off the ice. And I think I said this last year when we chatted about him, but you'd never know that he's a 17-year-old kid. You'd think he's been in the league for years. He's just so mature, the way he sees the game, how he handles himself on the ice, away from it. Very polished, very professional, but still allows a little bit of personality to come through. I know the big knock against Connor McDavid when he was going through junior was he was so robotic and just so stone-faced when he did all his interviews. And it's not the case with Shane. He'll show a little bit of emotion, but does it in a way where he's still very down the middle and level-headed about everything. And then you watch him on the ice, and the things he does on the ice, it's mind-blowing. And I know that he's gotten out to a bit of a slow start this year, and people were talking, well, maybe he's not as good as we thought, but he's playing with some top-notch talent, and so he draws guys that frees up all this space for these other wingers to go and do their thing, and he'll be okay with that because that's the type of player he's a very much a team-first guy, and you see it night in and night out.
Allan, I wanted to ask, with the World Juniors coming up, and speaking of Shane Wright, where do you think Wright fits in on Team Canada in terms of the amount of minutes he'll play on a night-to-night basis and what kind of line you see him playing on? Just where does he fit in your opinion?
I know a lot of people want him centering that top line, but I think the best fit for him is probably in the second, third line area, just because it'll be his first World Juniors, and with all the hype, there's going to be a ton of pressure on him. So if he's on that first line and he struggles, people are going to hop all over him and just come at him with their knives like they do during World Juniors time. But if you watch him on a night-to-night basis, he can play that real solid defensive type of center role, very much in the same style of a Patrice Bergeron or a Jonathan Taves, where they can produce, but they're really effective at shutting down the top units of the other guys. And there was one scout I was talking to earlier this year, and he said, well, Shane Wright, there was a lot of hype last year. He was off to that fantastic start after the under-17s, and this year he's slow out of the gate, probably an 80-point NHL player on a year-to-year basis. I just kind of looked and I was like, 80 points in the NHL, that's pretty damn good if you're clicking along 80 points every year consistently. And so I think he's probably going to carve himself out a niche as a defensive guy at the World Juniors this year.
Damn, I'd love to see that.
Yeah. Case?
Yeah, I kind of see him fitting into that team where they give him a little bit of wiggle room to start off, but the hopes here for me is that he does a Lafreniere type situation where he kind of finds his groove and then takes over for Team Canada, and I think that's what we all really want to see. But when there's a lot of hype going into the World Juniors, there's a lot of doubt for me. Like a guy like Quentin Byfield kind of rings to me there, because I had so much hype for him a year ago or 2 years ago, and then it was just kind of underwhelming at first, and then again he found his groove. But that's kind of a defensive center as well, so maybe that is the situation we're going to look at. I don't want to jump around too much. We're talking about the World Juniors, but I did have a question about something you've mentioned a couple of times now, and that's the slow start. I kind of noticed that with him. Like I've checked in on him a couple times this year and noticed the slow start. But my question for you is kind of more surrounding the league, because you see so many games. Do you think that the year off last year has really affected a lot of the players in this league? And do you think that that's going to have any sort of long-term repercussions on the guys that stuck around and didn't go to Europe?
Well, that's a great question, because a lot of the average fans really didn't keep tabs on the guys who were over in Europe playing or found other spots to go play, and it's making a huge difference. One of the Kingston Frontenacs that they picked up, Lucas Edmonds, he was playing over in Sweden, and this year he's come out on fire, and you can tell that year where he's kept it up, he's been in competitive games, has really paid off, whereas Shane Wright, he played 8-9 games at the under 18s as the captain, but other than that there was nothing competitive that he was involved in. And so for a top tier player, it's going to hurt you a lot. We saw the Clark brothers out of the Ottawa 67s and the Barrie Colts. They went over to Europe and they played, and it's paid off for them. It's a huge gap to go a year and a half and not play at all.
Yeah.
Like
I couldn't imagine that.
Other than pond hockey with your friends on an outdoor rink where there's really no rules, there's no dimensions, no systems, none of that. And then you come back, and on top of that, they've got a new head coach at the helm, a new GM at the helm, a bunch of new staff members. And so I think for Shane Wright, there's that period where he's got to get adjusted. And you've got also these rookies that he's playing with this year, guys like Matthew Soto, Paul Ludwinski, who are getting their feet wet at the OHL level, who, like Shane Wright, haven't really played competitively in a year and a half. So they're making the jump from minor hockey to major junior. Shane Wright's trying to get back into the groove. So there's a lot of moving pieces. And I think that probably right around Christmas is when we'll start to see teams actually look like what they're going to be for that final playoff push.
Yeah, no, that's exactly kind of the thought I had on it. And it's funny, I was going to bring up Graham Clark. Obviously, I have my eye pretty close to him. him and Nico Dawes are two guys that I've noticed, two OHL players that would have been playing in the OHL, but because of the season last year, they went over to Europe and now get their shot in the AHL, and they're both really benefiting from it. So anyone who played any bit of competitive hockey is obviously hitting the ground running this year, and Shane Wright is not one of those guys. So I think,
and I will say that they're set to get Zayde Wisdom back at some point over the next. There's not a timetable, but my guesstimation is probably next 2-3 weeks. He'll see action maybe within the next week. And Shane Wright and he played on the same line last year, and Zayde Wisdom and him had a lot of chemistry. So I think when Zayde comes back, you might see the line of him, Chromiak, and Wisdom reunited, which would be some familiarity, which would help him.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I think that everything I've heard about Shane Wright, this is just a little bit of adversity that he's going to overcome no matter what, and it's just more to his draft cap and his value going into the NHL.
Yeah, definitely. So, Allan, before we get into the conversation about the Montreal Canadiens, just to wrap it up on Shane Wright, looking at the teams that are in the bottom of the NHL standings and have a shot at winning the NHL draft lottery as of right now, I mean, I'm sure you would love to say Montreal, but is it Montreal? Is there another team in that mix that you think, knowing Shane Wright as well as you do, a team that would be the perfect fit for him?
I would love to say Montreal, but knowing them, they'll probably go on a run towards the end of the season and wreck their chances at it. Vancouver, I think Vancouver could be a good fit for them, especially because of everything they're going through. We're going to see a major overhaul there over the next probably month. I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet, but it's coming. It's just a matter of time, like in Montreal. So he could fit in nicely there as kind of a piece to build around. I want to say Arizona, but that's just a mess. And
it is.
Like, just get out if you're there. Yeah, I want to say your Sabres, but they seem to ruin guys.
Yeah, I'm worried about that myself.
And on another podcast, I actually said that the Sabres were going to be one of those like final teams knocking at a playoff spot door. So I can't really contradict myself with that. But who knows? They can fall apart like they always do. I think a team that's got a young core that they're going through that rebuilding phase could really benefit. And that's why Vancouver popped into my head, because they've got some pieces like Pedersen, Horvat, Quinn on the blue line. I think that if you slide like a Shane Wright in there, maybe start from there, and they could have a bright future.
Yeah, definitely. Well, hey, whatever franchise lands him at number one overall in the 2022 NHL draft is going to be very fortunate and benefit for a very long time. So great conversation about Shane Wright. And now let's get into the Montreal Canadiens. So big news last weekend, firing general manager Marc Bergevin and assistant GM Trevor Timmins and assistant GM Scott Mellanby resigning before that news broke out. Jeff Gorton steps in as the VP of Hockey Operations and will work alongside the new GM, whoever that is. Montreal currently sitting at 29th in the NHL, coming off a loss against the Vancouver Canucks on Monday night with a 6-16-2 record. So, Allan, first of all, let's just get your initial reaction to the news last weekend. And this was a move that you made very clear on social media was long overdue for the Montreal Canadiens.
If you go back through some of my tweets over the last 2-3 years, I've been calling for this for a while. I don't think Marc Bergevin was a good general manager. There's a lot of Habs fans and even some hockey fans confuse winning trades with building a contending team. And a lot like to say that if you do one, you can do the other. But you can go out and you can win trades, but it doesn't mean that your end goal is a team that can compete. And the thing that I've noticed with Marc Bergevin was he was pretty good at winning trades, but that's because he's picking up guys that don't fit into the big picture that other teams are getting rid of. And it was always like he's slapping a slab of Flex Seal on the holes that Montreal had. just to get by, and that's not gonna work long term. And I know if you look at any of the NHL teams that have won over the last decade, they've tried that, but then they went through that real rebuild where you actually scale things down and start at the ground and build back up. And as much as it pains me to say this, Toronto's one of those teams that went and they cleared everything out and then rebuilt, and now they are looking like a force and like they maybe have it figured out.
Hold on. Don't say anything too soon. I know you're trying to jinx us, similar to the Chris Johnston juggernaut tweet. I know what you're trying to do here, Allan, but it's not going to work, okay? You hate the Leafs and you can't say anything nice about them, okay? We got that clear?
Well, I mean, there's still that giant question and goal on what they're going to ride with, but I think Montreal is in a good shape now because they're going to go in the new structure that you mentioned. Jeff Gordon's going to be the VP, and as much as I think that they need to move away from having a guy that strictly can communicate in French and English, because we've got all sorts of technology and translators and stuff that can allow a strictly English-speaking general manager to still communicate with the French fans in Montreal. Ownership sees it as something that's absolutely critical, and so they've got Jeff Gordon there. They're going to have another guy that can do both English and French, and it's going to be interesting to see that dynamic unfold.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but give me a fucking break. Like, this is the NHL. Like, this isn't, like, why is that a criteria for the position? Like, can you explain that to me? I understand that they're the only team in the league who is in a province where they speak primarily French. However, half of their players aren't even Canadian, maybe probably more than half. And same with the entire NHL. And to me, it just makes absolutely zero sense why you would limit yourself to such a small pool of candidates. I know that Jeff Gordon is going to be doing the majority of the heavy lifting for this new group of management. But, like, at the same time, don't you want to hire the best hockey mind you can, or the best person for the job, not someone who might be good at the job? Like, we've talked about many people. Maybe Danny Briere is the guy. But at the same time, don't you think there's someone better who might not speak French? Like, Allan, can you explain what that is going on with this team here?
I don't fully understand it, but that's because I didn't grow up in the French culture and stuff. But what I can gather is that it goes back to their days when they had the rights to French players, and it was kind of the way of throwing a bone to them as most of the NHL at that time was strictly English, and they wanted Montreal in to kind of even the playing field out. So they got access to that, and then it kind of grew from there. That's what I can gather. And the French fans are very adamant of it. Like, there's times I've gotten into arguments with them on Twitter, and I'm like, listen, if this team only broadcasted their games in French and only did the interviews in French, I would find a way to still understand it. Like, growing up, we only got the games in French. I still watch them because they were my team. Like, you find a way to make it work. And we're in the 2021 where you can speak into your phone and it translates it to you. Yeah. Like, there's ways to get around that. And in MLB, it happens all the time. Guys don't speak the language of their market. You got guys coming in from Cuba, all over South America, Mexico, and they find ways to make it work. So I think it's very old school the way they're doing this, but that's the way they're going to do it. And so you mentioned Jeff Gordon's going to do a lot of the heavy lifting, but I would love to see Patrick Waugh. He just happens to speak both languages. I would love that. And he came out in the media today and he said, this team has been going in circles since 1993, and whatever they've tried hasn't worked. So what do they have to do what do they have to lose by hiring me? Nothing. It's either going to be the same or we're going to get better, and I think I know what it takes to make them better. So give me that type of guy, like a guy who's got the bravado to come out and say, I know how to fix this team. Give me the chance.
Okay. This isn't and I want to preface this isn't my thought. I just want to reiterate something I heard on the 32 Thoughts podcast about Patrick Waugh being the GM of this team. Don't you think the two maybe not the two egos, but don't you think his ego would conflict with Jeff Gorton if Jeff Gorton is supposedly the guy who is like running the show in Montreal? Don't you think that'd be a problem?
So he addressed that in the interview that he did this week, and he said he's come a long way since where he was in terms of that, and he's very open to the idea of working with another guy. So I have no reason to disbelieve that he means that. I don't know him personally, but I think if it's an opportunity for him to get to the NHL because that's where he wants to be again, I think he's willing to kind of check some things at the door if it gives him that opportunity. And why wouldn't he want to take over the Habs? They've kind of mended those fences that they broke after the 95 trade and then never really talked about until they retired his number.
I was going to say I could think of one reason, but
I think it's a full circle, and just looking at what he's done with the Remparts and being able to retool them. I know junior hockey's not NHL, but he's been able to find success at the junior hockey level, and approaching junior players who are now coming into the NHL tells me that he knows how to motivate those younger generation of players, because it's new age. That old school coaching doesn't work with them anymore. They want a different approach, and so he gets that. And I think it could be beneficial for the Habs if they were to pick him. There's other candidates too out there, but just for the stories and the good and inevitable bad that would come, I would love to see Patrick Roy.
That is an answer that tells me that you just love chaos, the good and the bad and the ugly from Patrick Roy.
Well, look at Marc Bergevin's tenure. We've had chaos with him. Like there was the year where Carey Price was injured, and then he came out and he said this team we're still going to compete, and then like half the team was injured and it was a mess. And it seems every other year there was some kind of chaos with Marc Bergevin.
It's true. Case, you got anything? I've got like a ton more questions. I don't know why. Like I'm just so interested in this situation. Got anything, Case, before I keep going?
I don't know. I kind of obviously I agree that there hasn't been a good GM in Montreal in some time. But my question is, do you think that the problem is more with building a team and with drafting, or is it with the development that's gone on in Montreal with their players? It seems like they haven't been able to develop guys. There's guys that come into the organization with a little bit of hype and then they seem to fall flat. Victor Mete, Noah Juleson, Sherbak, Kokaniemi, I guess I would throw in that category. And the kind of list goes on here. Like, it seems like a lot of the time they're either trying to rush guys into the lineup too quick. Again, Victor Mete, Cole Caulfield, for example, already is kind of hurting from that. But obviously he's going to rebound. He's got that skill. But Ryan Poehling, again, the list goes on. But it seems like they're trying to rush guys, and the development hasn't really worked. So do you think it's the scouting and or the development, or is that a Bergevin problem?
I think they're two that are linked together, because I think you've got scouts who are evaluating these guys higher than where they should be. And so the GM's drafting them in a spot where they're not meant to be. And so all of a sudden you've got this guy and you've got to answer for drafting them where they do. And the answer for that is to get them into the lineup and get them playing. And then all of a sudden they don't work out and you have to trade them. And you look at their lineup before Cole Caulfield, the last first round selection that they have in the lineup still is, off the top of my head, I think it's Carey Price, which was back early 2000s. Like, yeah. Your first round selections should still be in your system from the last, maybe not 10 years, because I understand that things happen, but you should definitely have something to show for your last 5 years of first round selections other than Cole Caulfield.
I've got the list here for you. Ready?
Let's hear it.
Right. Carey Price, but David Fisher, Ryan McDonough, wasn't a first round pick. Louis LeBlanc, Jared Tenorti, Nathan Bellew, Alex Galchenyuk, Michael McCarron, Nikita Sherbak, Sergachev, Poehling, Kokaniemi, Caulfield, Caden Gooley, and then Logan Mailloux. So yeah.
and a good chunk of those guys, like when they've bounced around to other teams, they don't last with those teams because of whether it's differences with the coaching staff or attitude issues. to me, those are things that you should find when you're doing your interviews with these players leading up to the draft. Like something should set off an alarm bell that says, hey, this guy might not be a fit with our system. Yeah.
And something that rings to me as a Bergevin problem here is that none of these guys are still on their roster, but none of them have really returned anything significant other than Sergachev.
Well, and not just that, but a lot of these guys aren't playing in the NHL, which means, which to me, that says to me that they weren't NHL quality players to begin with. So how do you get them ranked that high?
Yeah.
Like I can understand, I can understand maybe one here and there where you overrank them and think there's something they're not because it's junior hockey. Players can fall off, they can graduate, and then it doesn't turn out the way you want. But like for this to happen so often with one team, like to me that screams that your scouting staff and your GM got different ideas of what it takes to be an NHLer.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're going to miss on all these first round picks, you got to hit later in the draft, and no one's really jumping off the page for me here.
Well, Brendan Gallagher's probably their late round selection that is Bergevin's biggest hit, because I think he was a 5th or 6th round guy. Yeah. But then that creates another problem that I talked about earlier, where he's trying to patch holes with bargain deals because your drafting's been so terrible. So now you're picking up scraps that other teams don't want. Well, why don't they want them? There's a reason.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Allan, I want to go back to one of the names that Casey mentioned, and it was their first round pick in the 2021 draft. And this was a question that was brought up by Jeff Merrick and Elliot Friedman on 32 Thoughts, saying that was the Logan Mailloux pick and all of that controversy around him, did that play a factor into the firing of Bergevin and Trevor Timmins at all? What do you think about that?
I think if they don't have the start that they have this year, it doesn't factor into it at all. But I think it's just another reason that gave Jeff Molson an out to kind of clear house and move forward with a new direction and a new staff. If this team comes out and they're knocking at the door at the top of the Eastern Conference, we're not even talking about that anymore. But because they've struggled, Carey Price in the draft, and then the injury, and then the Logan Mailloux stuff, it's just another thing that they can add to the list to hold against Marc Bergevin. And to be honest, it was kind of a baffling selection when they did it. Like, this kid comes out, he puts out the press release saying, I don't want to be picked. Every other team in the league didn't choose him. And then Montreal, coming off their best season since probably the last time they were in the conference finals against the Rangers, and they do that, which ruins all the good will that they created with their playoff run. And so it can be forgiven if you get out to a good start, but then they struggled, they can't win games, they can't score goals, and then it just all piles on. So I think it factors into it. I don't think it's the main reason, but it's certainly one of the reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about that pick, the Logan Mailloux pick, first of all, like, I'm shocked that he still went in the first round after putting out that statement saying, I don't want to be picked at all. I want to reevaluate and work on my character and come back next year. But I will say, I did hear that only about half the teams in the NHL had him on their do not draft lists. So only about half.
Like, he was going in the draft, probably one of those late round picks by a team in Montreal for some reason. Again, maybe that comes down to the scouting staff and the GM again. Decided this was a good move, and they grab him in the late first round, which, like, no matter how you slice it, he could be Shane Wright. It doesn't make any sense to pick him there.
Yeah, and the funniest, not the funniest because this is a serious matter, but when asked to justify the pick, Trevor Timmins was the one who had that famous quote, and I'll quote it here, I'll repeat it. It was, and that was it. It was just silence. There was nothing said. How can you not even justify the pick. If you pick the guy, you know what I'm saying? Like that is
so
crazy.
I've got a buddy who used to be a scout for them, and like when that happened, he just goes, "I can't believe that they picked him. Like it doesn't make any sense at all why they would select him there." And you nailed it. Like Trevor Timmons' reaction, they're in the dressing room when they're doing this press conference. It was still when they were doing Zoom.
Yeah.
And he's just sitting there, and somebody asked him, and he just goes, and then it's silence, and you're just like, well, did this freeze? And then no, he blinks, and there's just no justifying it. It almost like Bergevin went rogue and just decided on his own to choose this kid.
That was like 10 seconds of just silence. And that 10 seconds felt like 6 minutes. Like that was unbelievable.
It did. That was painful for sure. Case, sorry.
An NHL team is a business, and a business does background checks on every single person that they hire. And drafting this kid is hiring him. So it absolutely blew my mind when I saw that. I was like, not only is the GM and scouting in question, but HR is in question in that case.
Seriously.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Allan, I had another question for you. I have a couple, but my first one that I wanted to ask, and I know we're running a bit, long on time here, so I guess we should wrap up soon. But the first question I wanted to ask you is, did you expect this out of the gate from the Montreal Canadiens? Did you expect them to be this bad after making the Stanley Cup Finals last season? Because I did.
Of course you did. You're a Leaf fan.
Stuff that in.
Get those digs in now because what was it, 3-1, and how did that work out?
Yeah.
I didn't think they were going to be this bad. I honestly thought that they had upgraded a lot of areas that were struggling in, but then the Weber news falls, the Carey Price news falls. And all of a sudden it seems like those two, it looks like this team is just missing leadership in there. And then you look at the pieces that they moved out in Deneau, Perry, even Kotkaniemi, and you start to figure it out that these players maybe were a bigger piece to the puzzle than a lot of fans thought.
Yeah, I think the Deneau one hurts a lot now, and seeing him having a relatively successful start to the year with LA, I think they definitely missed some of that leadership, defensive capabilities, and just overall like just a veteran player who knows how to play.
Well, especially because Matthew Perreault, who was supposed to be the guy to replace him, has been injured. So
yeah,
there's another guy on the list.
Yeah. Exactly. Allan, I want to go back to Jeff Gorton, the man that comes in as the VP of hockey operations. And just speaking for myself, I'm quite fond of Jeff Gorton and the job that he did with the Boston Bruins as an assistant general manager, and then the job that he did as a GM in New York with the Rangers. And that was a situation where he was kind of the quiet guy, just going about his business and making all the hockey moves and the decisions. And then he's got the face there in John Davidson. Now the roles are reversed a little bit for him, where he's going to be in that top role in the Canadiens organization, but he can still conduct himself the way he always has, and work with the general manager, whoever that will be. So just my question for you is, why do you think Jeff Gorton is a good hire for the Montreal Canadiens?
He seems to have a modern approach to building an NHL team, and you talked about his work with Boston, which was a massive success there. Kind of retooled that organization along with their GM's name escapes me right now.
Oh, Don Sweeney.
That's it. They retooled that Boston team who needed it very badly and made them one of the contenders in the East. And then New York, a lot of the success that they're seeing right now was because of the work that Jeff Gorton put in during his time. And I think he's one of the better talent evaluators in the NHL, and being able to see what you've actually got there instead of what could be. And I think maybe that's one of Marc Bergevin's faults, was that he was banking on the what could be instead of the what actually is. whereas Jeff Gordon's going to see what you have there, and he's going to come in with no attachment to any of these players. Marc Bergevin maybe had that personal attachment or that emotional attachment to certain players. Gordon can come in and he can do whatever he sees fit to make this team better. And if I'm him right now, the only untouchable is Nick Suzuki. Everybody else is in play, and if you can find a suitor for them, go out and do it.
Even Caulfield?
Everybody's got a price.
Fair enough.
The only one I'm not touching is Nick Suzuki, because I think he could probably turn into maybe a lesser Patrice Bergeron down the road, maybe even like the same type of Patrice Bergeron. But everybody else is if you can find a deal that's going to make your team better, why not?
And Allan, you got to be feeling good that Suzuki is locked up long term before this all happens, right? Because I mean, that would just be another reason for the Canadiens fans to be worried. But down the middle, just talking about Suzuki, we mentioned Ryan Poehling a little earlier. I do think he's starting to slowly hit his stride, which is a good sign for this team.
Yeah, Poehling's really impressed me since his call-up. He's been solid for the Montreal Canadiens, and kind of looks like he's starting to put it all together, and he's got that chance now to go and have that expanded role with the Habs. This mess maybe is a blessing in disguise in that sense, because now they've got to play him and see what he's got. Whereas before they were going on that run last year and he was buried, and Laval not getting that opportunity on the big stage. Now we're seeing what he can do, and I like it. I think he fits into the Habs' future plans if he sticks around, and he could be a third, fourth line guy for them.
Allan, this is my last one that I have for you. We talked about sort of the struggles of the Habs this year and the firing of the management group and everything. What do you think the Habs need to do this season at the deadline in particular? What is sort of your short-term and long-term expectations of this team?
Short term, you got to go and you have to evaluate that. What are the building blocks of your team moving forward? If Brendan Gallagher's not in your future plans because he's now up there and he's got I think it's a 6-year contract.
Yep.
If he's not in your future plans, then you go out and you find a suitor for him and get some pieces back, whether they're young guys or draft picks, something you can use to move forward. Same with, you're going to have a ton of suitors for Carey Price, and you got to look at that. He's on the other side of 30 right now, and he's a Hall of Fame goaltender down the road. You're going to have guys lining up to take shots at him, especially with his playoff performance last year. And you'd be crazy not to entertain those offers. I think probably Ben Sherratt's on his way out as well. Some other guys too, and that's the short term. The long term is, you have to find an identity for what your team's going to be, and I'm a firm believer in you build with strength down the middle and then go from there. And they've got a player like Nick Suzuki that can kind of be the center point for that, and so start to surround him with guys that are going to accentuate that. Young, speed. I don't think size is as much a requirement anymore as it used to be. It's still nice to have some, because come playoff time, you're going to have the grind, you're going to get knocked around, but you don't need that emphasis as much. And your defense have to be able to skate and move the puck. And Montreal just doesn't have that right now on their blue line. They're big, tall, bulky guys that are going to punish forwards. But when it comes to skating, well, I mean, Ben Sherratt's not gonna set the world ablaze. That's for sure.
I think the last actual puck moving defenseman who could play consistently in their top 4 that they've had. I mean, you can say Petrie, we've seen it in flashes, and also Weber, he could move the puck a lot better before, his whole injury fiasco. But I want to say Andrei Markov. They haven't had a ton of guys who have been able to move the puck efficiently.
Markov is the guy, and you know what? Maybe I think he's still playing out there. Go on, sign him on a 1-year deal. Have him come in and mentor a player like Romanov.
Yeah, there you go. So my kind of building off my final question here, and I promise this is my final one. You think that they should just blow it up then? Is that right?
Yeah, so Marc Bergevin did what he called a retool, which was essentially a rebuild without the title. But he tried to do it on the fly, and it doesn't work, because you're just getting bargain pieces to try to plug holes, and all of a sudden you get players like Shea Weber, who is banged up, Carey Price is banged up, and those guys you're relying on, now your team gets exposed. I think you have to start over and just do what the Rangers really did and start at the ground level and go from there.
Yeah. Case, any final questions or thoughts for Allan before we wrap up?
I'm trying to think of how I want to pose this question to Allan, and I'm having a difficult time here. But basically, I want to give him a chance to have both a scapegoat on this season as well as a chance to come clean about last season. Basically, I'm trying to ask: is you can only pick one? You can only pick one. Are they having bad luck this season, but really deserved to go to the Stanley Cup Finals last year? Or are they, was there a lot of circumstance that's happening for them to have a bad season this year? But to tag that along, you have to say that there was a lot of good circumstance to allow them go to the Stanley Cup Finals last year. You can only pick one side to be on here.
Yeah, so were they unlucky last year, or were they lucky last year or unlucky this year, I guess is what you're getting at, Case?
I don't know. I'm trying to
understand.
There's two universes that you have to pick one to live in and have the best of both worlds. That, they deserved it last year, but there's a lot of circumstances on why it's bad this year.
So I think it's that one. I think they definitely earned it in the playoffs last year. Like they played a perfect game to expose the weaknesses of the teams that they played. Like Toronto, they tried to play that run and gun for the first 3 games and they got burned. And so all of a sudden they said, "Hey, we're not gonna. This won't work. We have to slow it down and grind it out." And then started to see success. And I think Carey Price got hot, which would be one of those things going right. And then this year, there's a lot going wrong for them. Injuries, off ice stuff with Marc Bergevin and all that. And so I think that's what it is. It's a tough question, Case.
But if that's Allan, if that's the case, then wouldn't you say, okay, we have a good team here, let's not blow it up and let's kind of figure out what the problem is, and it can't be very big, right? Like, don't those two ideas go together?
But the team that went last year, you've lost, I think it was 7 guys from that roster that when I went through and plucked them off. And yeah, they're supporting cast members, but you've got, off the top of my head, Corey Perry's gone, Gustafson's gone, John Merrill's gone, Phil Deneau's gone, Kotkaniemi's gone, Shea Weber's out right now, and there was another guy that's escaping me off the top of my head. But yeah, 7 big pieces of that roster are gone, and I know it looked like a tryout contract for Corey Perry, but he was a massive role on that Habs team last year and a big reason why they were able to get into the playoffs.
He was.
Yeah. And now that he's gone to Tampa Bay, which is tough to swallow because that's the team you lost to in the final. But his leadership, I think, was really good for those young players. And I know he reached out to Nick Suzuki when Nick Suzuki signed his deal this year. And that kind of mentorship goes a long way. Everybody talks about the intangibles. Corey Perry brought that off the ice.
Yeah. Well, Allan, thanks for answering that question. And Chad, thanks for saving that question. I am a lot better at arguing and complaining than I am at interview questions. And I'm sure that half the listeners are on the ground right now, writhing in pain after they try to gouge their own ears out.
Christ.
That's all right, Case. We could still follow that one. So
we'll fix that in
post. No worries at all. Allan, last one for me. It's a simple one to wrap things up. Where do you see the Montreal Canadiens finishing in the standings at the end of the season?
That's so hard because there's some bad teams in the Eastern Conference this year. I think they'll probably get it together and they'll finish around 11, 12, somewhere around there in the conference. They always have a knack. They always have a knack for really putting like a run together when they shouldn't.
Yeah.
And Carey Price is going to be back, so he's going to steal some games for them. And again, they're going to have some games down the stretch against some bad teams where it's going to be like the Flint, Michigan Mega Bowl. So, that's good for a couple points here and there. And so I think they'll probably finish in the bottom half of the conference. And who knows? Maybe it's maybe the price is right this year.
Could be. That's a good place to end it. So, Allan, again, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure, and looking forward to seeing what happens in the near future here with the Montreal Canadiens, who they hire as their next general manager, what kind of deals and decisions they make moving forward. So, thank you for the insight. Always appreciated, and take care. All the best.
Thanks again. Always a pleasure to join you guys.
Thanks for joining us, Allan. Looking forward to mopping the floor with you in a few weeks in fantasy.
Hey, listen, I should have my guys back by then. Fingers crossed, and then I'm coming to case.
Oh, damn. All right. Thanks a lot, man.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thanks, Allan.
This has been another episode of Boys in the Booth with Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams. New episodes every Monday on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Connect with the Boys in the Booth on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Boys in the Booth. Visit boysinthebooth.com for show details, and don't forget, you can become a patron of the podcast for just $1 a month at www.patreon.com/boysinthebooth.